hope you enjoyed your meal, and we'll thank you to the crew at the Best Western here for preparing a great meal. We have greetings from several people here that I want to share with you. Now, the first one is a very nice, however rather lengthy letter, and I won't attempt to read all of it, but this is an open letter to the Fairfield Area Chamber of Commerce's membership on its 75th anniversary. This is a privilege for me to be able to pay honor to a group of dedicated individuals whom over the years have volunteered their time to serve on the Chamber's Board of Directors, its executive directors, and the membership at large for their respective goal to make Jefferson County a home for business, industry, and education while maintaining a strong business infrastructure within the Fairfield community. And then it goes on with a lot of reminiscences, and if anyone would like to read this, it's here from George Jordan, Lenox, Massachusetts. I didn't think that would be so funny, Marty. Okay, I think the order may become obvious here as I go along, but this next letter, Dear Jim, my sincere congratulations on the Fairfield Area Chamber of Commerce celebrating their 75th anniversary. This is definitely a noteworthy milestone in Fairfield's history, and I know the Chamber of Commerce has played a major role in promoting the growth and economic vitality of the community. Fairfield is a progressive community with innovative ideas, with people willing to work diligently to improve the quality of life. The Iowa Department of Economic Development works with Chambers of Commerce on numerous projects, and we have always found the leaders of these groups to possess vision and ingenuity. Your members are cooperative and hardworking in reaching their goals for stimulating growth in Fairfield. I commend the Fairfield Chamber of Commerce on 75 successful and productive years, and I look forward to seeing great things happen in Fairfield in the years to come. Sincerely, C.J. Niles, Director, Department of Economic Development in Iowa. And the final greeting here comes on letterhead from the Office of the Governor. Dear friends, congratulations on the 75th anniversary of the Fairfield Area Chamber of Commerce. This is truly a time of great celebration. Milestones like these demonstrate the rich history of our great state. The 75th anniversary is a chance for the members of the Chamber of Commerce to reflect on how far their organization has come since its inception. Over the years, in good times and bad, the Fairfield Area Chamber of Commerce has carried out its essential mission of developing the local economy and creating opportunities for Iowans. Congratulations on 75 years of excellence, and best wishes for the next 75 years as well. Organizations like yours make Iowa a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. Sincerely, Thomas J. Vilsack, Governor, and Sally J. Pedersen, Lieutenant Governor. So we appreciate those greetings. Well, getting back to my historical research here, tell me if I'm boring you. In 1927, there was an article in... Is this for my mother? Okay, Bob Moore. I have a message here for him. Okay. All right, in 1927, there were reported to be 34 factories in Fairfield, employing 2,085. And the names of some of those that I saw advertised in the Ledger, the W.H. Pence Machine Company, familiar one, Fairfield Glove and Mitten Company, Iowa Malleable, Louden Machinery Company, Heston and Anderson. They advertised that they made quality saws, jointers, and lathes. And there was an ice cream factory in town, Harlan and Gibson. They manufactured ice cream and soda water. And in 1927, they remodeled their hardening room to accommodate 650 more gallons of ice cream. I'm sure that was good news. And also there was a bottling company in Fairfield at 119.5 East Broadway, the Forest City Bottling Works, and their product was not Mountain Dew, but Mountain Cabin. The ad said, drink Mountain Cabin, 5 cents a bottle, which probably was the going rate for any kind of a beverage in those days. Well, so with that review of industry in 1927, I'd like to introduce Dave Rieff to present greetings from the Fairfield Economic Development Association.
Thanks a lot, Jim. You've done an outstanding job of bringing some history to this event. And really, I guess that's the beauty of commemorating 75 years in a community like this. If you can't take time to look back at your roots, all the successful things that have happened in this community because of people like those in this room that have given immense hours of volunteerism, staffs that go unrecognized, ex officios, etc., that make this community what it is. It's pretty humbling to just be a president of a group when the clock says it's 75. We're just bit players, and proud to be part of this celebration tonight. The thing that we want to point out is that the Fairfield Economic Development Association is about 100 members, stockholders, that formed years ago and have been in this current nonprofit status since the late 70s. And it was at that time that the wisdom of the boards then said that we should share an exec so that both groups could have the right kind of people leading us affordably, because these execs get paid an awful lot of money. But again, the staffs, the endless hours that they put in to make these groups successful, this city successful, we just had such a good relationship over the years. You read where a lot of communities either join up these groups and then bust them apart when they don't work, and I think it's just quite a legacy here that we've made it work for this many years. And we're thankful to be part of the Chamber's success tonight.
Thank you, Dave. And you're absolutely right. The partnership over the years has been tremendous. Now, under President's remarks, that means I can say whatever I want, and there isn't anything I'd rather talk about than the automotive industry. But from a historical perspective, in 1927, the country was waiting to see what Henry Ford's next model was going to be. The Model T, the 15 millionth Model T rolled off the line in May, I believe I read, and the rest of the year was spent in anticipation of the new Model A, which was yet to come. And also I found an article in 1927 that it was reported that Henry Ford was worth at least $1 billion, which is pretty remarkable. The company started in 1903, and in a matter of 24 years he was a billionaire, one car at a time. Well, oh, and by the way, the joke always goes with the Model T that you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. Well, with the Model A came a choice of colors. You could have it in Niagara blue, Arabian sand, dawn gray, or gunmetal blue were the colors. In Fairfield, there were 11 different car dealerships that I could find advertised in the newspaper. The Ford dealer was Easton Motor Sales at 122 North Main, and they sold Ford, Lincoln, and also Fordson tractors was part of their business, and their ad said that you could own a car for 25 cents a day. Then there was, well, maybe 25 cents over invoice, how about that? Then the Chevrolet dealership was Billiter Chevrolet, which continued in business for a number of years, and some people may remember them. They were across from the Leggett Hotel, which is where First National Bank is now, and they advertised a sport cabriolet for $715. Green Johnson was located in the Masonic Temple building. You may have noticed there's a ramp by the building there where they could drive cars up on the roof of the beatbox or something like that. They were a Chrysler dealer. They advertised the Chrysler 70, and they said that the model number means miles per hour. So you could go 70 in a Chrysler 70. D.D. Howell was on South Main, and he advertised the Greater Oakland 6 for $1,095, or the Pontiac 6 for $825. And they managed to, Ackley Motor Company from Ottumwa managed to sneak into town and displayed the LaSalle at D.D. Howell's garage that year. McGuire Motor Company was at 117 East Broadway selling Willie's Knight and the Overland Whippet. Gillespie Motor Company was at 114 East Broadway selling Dodge Brothers motor cars and the Hupmobile. And then there was the Buick dealer, Hanna Auto Company, which claimed to be the oldest auto establishment in Jefferson County. And a familiar name, Danielson Motor Company, sold Nash at 121 East Broadway. And then Robinson Motor Company at 401 North 4th advertised Judge Studebaker's Erskine 6. And Reeves Auto Company, I didn't get an address, they sold Packard and Hudson. And I thought it was interesting that there was a General Motors ad in the paper that obviously placed by Detroit that advertised their brands, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Olds, Buick, Cadillac, of course, and Oakland, LaSalle, Frigidaire, and also the Delco Light Company, which that was the way that people in the rural countries had lights. If they had it at all, they had a Delco plant that was their generator. Well, so enough about the automotive industry, and now on with some other more serious remarks, I guess. But just a second to what Dave said as far as the partnership goes with FEDA, it has been good. It has allowed us to employ good quality people in our professional staff, and more than either one of us could do by ourselves. So that partnership over the years has been a good one. And looking back over the history, people, that really has been the key over these past 75 years. There's always been people that have been willing to step up, stand in the gap, pick up the slack, do whatever needed to be done to keep things going. I look back, a lot of these past presidents, I don't know too much about them, but I see William Stever, he was president for 3 years, God help him. Henry Hartrick was president for 2 years. Jack McKenzie was president for 2 years. 72, 73 was hard times for the Chamber of Commerce, and Gordon Astrop was president for both of those years, and Roberta Ulm ran the office, and we ran without an executive for 2 years, so that was a difficult time. I think if you read in our tabloid in the Ledger, Linda Swan, she admitted that she wasn't the first choice for president the year she served, but she stepped up and did a great job and opened the way for the women that followed. Jeff Wilson, he had to take another year when they hired the president-elect, Bob Phipps, to be chamber executive. Chuck Espy's in that category of working an extra year when some key people, he was he was like me, he was counting the days probably for the end, and then somebody moved and he had to do it for another year. So really the people have been key to make it a success. The other thing that has made the chamber successful, I think, is that they've always wanted to be responsive to what was important. They wanted to know what was important to the town, what the needs of the town were, and respond to them as well as they could. And I found the first article, I think Bev maybe found this article in the Ledger, the first mention of the Chamber of Commerce in October of 1927. What do you suppose the first two things they did? They published a map. Every chamber has to have a map. And they took a survey. There was questionnaire number 1 was printed in the Ledger, seeking opinions on the key issues. Number 1, should we keep oil in the streets or should we pave them? Should we pave them all at once or pave just a few blocks every year? And something about changing the form of city government to a manager. And apparently the health department had been down and done a survey on Fairfield. I don't know what the trouble was, whether there's sewer in the streets or what, but they had done an extensive report, and the survey said, well, what do you want to do about this? And since over the past 75 years, has been study after study, where we're trying to find out what really is important. Chuck Espy was president in 1978 when they had the Fairfield Goes study, growth-oriented economic study. 84 was the Fantas study when Sherry Brewer was president. 93, Jerry Long was real active in doing a strategic planning for the chamber. And in 2002, we're anxiously awaiting the results of Fairfield's strategic planning report, which we know will give us some good indications of some things that are important for the future of Fairfield. So I guess based on our history, I hope you feel that the Chamber of Commerce is an organization that you can count on to get things done. In 1954, Jack McKenzie was president when they organized the wagon train to go to Des Moines to recognize the 100th anniversary of the State Fair, and we're approaching the 150th anniversary in '04. In 1967, I thought the picture in the tabloid was great on the front page there, the banner across the street that said Fairfield fights back. That was the Chamber's project. You know, when you attack Fairfield, we're going to defend you. As long as it doesn't involve fighting, I guess. RAGBRAI, Tim Kiken was president of the Chamber. RAGBRAI was a big project his year. Sarah Cochran got a mention in the tabloid for the wagon wheel apartments. That was a Chamber project. And 1956, when Chain and Cable wanted to come to town and they needed a building, in less than 36 hours, the Fairfield Chamber of Commerce Development Council raised over $100,000 to make that happen. So the Chamber has been here to make things happen in the past, and I hope you feel that we're still in position to find out what's important and make sure that it gets done in the future. Now, today I attended my first meeting as a trustee of Iowa Wesleyan College. There, Chuck, I did my assignment. I told 160 people about Iowa Wesleyan College. Chuck was there too, so give him a little bit of credit. Our facilitator told a story about his 89-year-old mother and his 100-year-old grandmother. And he felt like he needed to buy them a present, but what do you buy a 100-year-old woman? I guess it was a little bit hard to know. But so he asked her, what, Aunt so-and-so, what is it that I could buy you for this momentous occasion? And she kind of looked out in the front yard and she says, well, that old oak tree isn't there anymore that used to be in the front yard, and the old cedar tree that we used to tie our pony to is looking a little decrepit. Why don't you plant trees? And so his mother agreed, says, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you plant some trees, the shade of which we may never enjoy? So I guess looking back over 75 years, tonight we're enjoying the shade of some trees that were planted 75 years ago. And every year since then, some trees have been planted. And the question that we need to ask is, what trees are we planting today? Are we just getting by with fast-growing trees that will make a little shade quick and then not amount to anything? Or are we planting some impressive trees that will line the streets of Fairfield and invite people to come to town and make it a better place? And that's what I hope that we're still able to do here in the Chamber of Commerce. Now I'd like to recognize some other important people. Former employees of the Chamber. I know some of you have gotten reacquainted and had a chance to speak with some former employees that are back, and I'll try to go down through the list. Deb Henley had a reservation, but I don't... Is she here? Okay, Deb Henley is a former Chamber employee that we're glad to have back. Please stand. Former executive Charlie Barnett. And Charlie, have you seen your picture in the tabloid yet?
Thank God, no.
Jeff Wilson was very proud of your leisure suit. Still wearing it. Former employee Mary Louise Sutherland. And Wanda Abernathy. And former executive Mike Brewer. I skipped over him, I think. Mike Brewer, too. Are there any other former employees that I've missed? Oh, right here, right in front of me. Sorry, Judy. And to recognize our former past presidents, I would like to, oh wait a minute, I had some more history to share with you. I forgot to turn over that page. Just trying to fit this in between here. Some of the other businesses in Fairfield in 1927. I mentioned some that were kind of interesting or familiar still. This one caught my eye. Every day in the ledger on about the next to the last page, right under the comic strip, there was a long, narrow ad there, and it was Dr. Rasmussen, who advertised as an osteopath and new and bargain musical instruments. Pearson & Pearson Plumbing was in business at 107 North Court. I saw an ad from the Fairfield Marble and Granite Works, L.E. Whitney, proprietor. And I don't know if anyone remembers the Totem Inn at Chautauqua Park. They advertised barbecue sandwiches and changed hands that year. Glenn Parcell was the owner, and then later Mr. and Mrs. J.E. Cohagen took over the Totem Inn. And also I saw that the Ledger was selling typewriters at that time. You could buy a Remington typewriter for $60. Then, of course, I had to make notice of the funeral homes in town at the time. There was a funeral home on the square. Mark Hoskins was the funeral director. And then there was the Murray Jones Undertaking Company, and they advertised that they had a lady assistant upon request. And then there was a Butler's Funeral Home at 201 West Broadway. They advertised a sedan ambulance and picture framing. And then later in the year, apparently they were kind of competitive with the fact that the Murray Jones had a lady assistant was a competitive advantage. So later in the year then I saw that Butler's advertised that they also had a lady assistant to handle those things that a woman's intuition was good to have. And but they said that Mrs. Butler was always at your service and there was never any charge for Mrs. Butler. Of course, the oldest, I think we're fairly certain that the oldest business in town is Tribune Printing, and they had an ad in the Ledger that year. Fairfield Lumber Company was in business and advertised mulehide asphalt roofing, which must have been real good. Okay, now let's take a tour around the square. Starting on the west side, Spurgeon's was on the west side of the square, and I'm not naming all the businesses, just the ones that said that they were on the square. Spurgeon's, Bailey and Harper's advertised Atwater Kent radios. There was Myers Shoe Store above Spurgeon's. And then, let's see, I moved him someplace else. Then moving to the north side, on the northwest corner was Mel's Cafe. That sounds like a good place. J.C. Penney was on the north side. The new Ferris store advertised dry goods and rugs. Sussman's was Fairfield's only exclusive ready-to-wear store, and they advertised an exquisite fur-trimmed coat for $24.95. And then also E.C. Lieber sounded kind of like Party Goods and More. It was around Halloween, and they were advertising crepe paper and different things like that. And I got Lee Gobble corrected me that at that time Gobble and Here was on the north side of the square. And he, of course, told the story that some jokester always walked in and asked if Her was here. And then over on the east side of the square was People's Furniture Store, and they advertised that as the furniture side. So I don't know if Bradshaw's maybe was over there too. It sounded like there might have been more than one furniture store on that side. You could buy Carhartt overalls at AC Mogul, and Carlson Hardware was on the east side. And then on the south side was the Economy Store, which sold shoes, and Colson's Bakery. So now I'd like to introduce somebody that might actually remember some of those things. Representing all the past presidents, our most senior past president from 1947, Tom Louden.
Thank you, Jim. The Forest City Bottling Works sold those bottles by the case for 3 cents. So we could make about $0.50 if we sold a case at our pop stand. And there were some chuckles when Jim remarked about they were paving Highway 34 and Highway 1 in 1927. Well, that was a big deal because the Chamber really was responsible for getting that job done when they were the commercial club in Fairfield. And the other side to that story is that when you got to Van Buren County, when you got to Henry County, when you got to Washington County, and when you got to Wapello County, you dropped off into the mud. So it may be humorous now, but it was a big deal as far as we were concerned. Now, I shouldn't have spent that time because when Bob Phipps called me, he told me he wanted me to represent all 75 of the past administrations, and he didn't want to give me a subject to talk about, and that sounded like a pretty big assignment. And then he dropped the other shoe and he said, "You got 3 minutes." Well, that's a big challenge, and I'll see what I can do with it, but it's a hell of a thing to do to a retired lawyer when he's got a forum like this. During the 70-year lifetime of the Chamber of Commerce, we've seen probably more changes in the world than in any other period of history. And as those changes took place, they came down to the local level, and it meant that the Chamber of Commerce during those years had to adjust, had to look at the challenges and figure solutions to them. And the Fairfield Chamber has done one great job during those years. I'm in fear of anybody besides Gobble contradicting what I might say, so I'm going to concentrate my remarks on a period when most of you weren't here. During the first 40 or 50 years of the life of the Chamber of Commerce, and I think this is important that you know about it because it does bear on what may happen in the future in Fairfield. Fairfield was a very thriving community. We had a great marriage of retail, industry, agriculture, and higher education. Our retail establishments have been touched upon by Jim, but he missed some. Because you see, the square and the surrounding area of the square was our mall. And we had everything on the square, from grocery stores to furniture to men's clothing to women's clothing. You could buy whatever you wanted in Fairfield. You didn't need to go to Iowa City. You didn't need to go to Des Moines. And the retail merchants were very much a part of the life of this community. They were on the Chamber of Commerce board, they were on the school board, they were on the city council. But add to that home-owned industry, and you touched on it, Jim, but that industry employed 1,800 to 2,000 people. And there were a lot of skills involved there. There were engineers, there were architects. There were a number of different skills, and the industries shared their people and encouraged their people to be part of the community, to work for the community. And they did it. Not only that, but the industries themselves shared their facilities and their expertise with the community. Then we had Parsons College, and the relationship between the town and gown was exceptional. The professors at Parsons College, the staff at Parsons College were involved in all manner of things, including the Chamber of Commerce Board, and the town supported the college. Their football games, their athletics, their performances out on the campus, the townspeople attended. Then we had an agricultural community that supported Fairfield, and in those days the stores stayed open Saturday night until 9 or 10 o'clock, and the farming community came in, and that was their social life, and they spent their money here. There were a lot of things that were accomplished in this community because there was a perfect marriage between these several different types of activities. But there was an intangible in Fairfield that set it aside from most communities. And it's reflected in some ways tonight by the number of people who have come back here from a distance. Starting back post-Civil War, Fairfield was a very progressive community. And if you look at its history, you'll see that those people in those days decided that there wasn't anything that couldn't be done in Fairfield. There was a development commission here in 1872, and they brought a wagon factory here that employed some 500 people. Now, in the 1880s, they developed a first electrical light factory, or plant. It was done by a local industrialist. He built it and said if it didn't work, he'd pay for it. If it did work, the city could pay him. And it did work. Those things continued through the 19th century into the 20th century. And by the time the Chamber came into existence, there was an attitude in Fairfield that this was the greatest place in the world to live, and we were going to keep it that way. There were a lot of arguments about how, but not what was going to be done. You mentioned Jack McKenzie and the Chamber of Commerce Development Commission. That was one of the things that was accomplished in a very short period of time. But not only did they bring ACO to Fairfield, but they brought a Rockwell Standard to Fairfield 2 years later. These were two companies that were great citizens of Fairfield for a number of years. But going back to 1930, we had the Chamber of Commerce deciding that we needed some more industry in Fairfield, and they got a group together who bought the Streeter Company and brought it to Fairfield. They made refrigerator doors. They were a good employer here for a number of years. The attitude in Fairfield set it aside from other communities, and Fairfield was recognized as, if not the best, certainly one of the best communities in the state of Iowa. Now the challenges have changed. Our community has changed. But I think the other presidents from my vintage will agree with me that we were blessed. Our job was easy because the change wasn't as great, but there are certain things you can rely on. The spark is still here in Fairfield to make this a great community. The Chamber of Commerce still has a capability of evaluating the problems and finding the solutions. And I thoroughly believe that the next 75 years are going to be even better than the past. Thank you, Jim.
Tom, I have a special presentation to make to you, and this is, all of the past presidents are going to receive this presentation also, but you're the one that gets to receive it first and directly. The rest we're going to ask to come up later and receive it. But we're very fortunate to have a very talented artist in town, Susan Bates Kessel, and well, maybe we better stand over closer to this.
Okay.
We're on TV, you know.
Sorry about that.
And Susan has created a very unique artwork here representing the town of Fairfield, and we have one of these for you and for every past president. And with it, we give you our thanks for all your efforts over the past 75 years.
Thank you, Jim. Any work of Susan is very valuable. And incidentally, I apologize for going over my 3 minutes, but when you're talking about something you love, it's hard to stop.
Well, Tom, I think I have a solution to that problem. Our guest speaker gave me carte blanche to cut as much out of his introduction as I wanted to, and so I think we can make up that lost time. This is the main attraction coming here now. Our featured speaker tonight had a long career as a featured columnist with the Des Moines Register and co-hosted the RAGBRAI bicycle ride across Iowa. Chuck Offenburger, also known as the Iowa Boy, is now writing a column for the Iowan magazine and doing other freelance writing from his home in Storm Lake, Iowa. He is originally from Shenandoah. He and his wife Carla live in Storm Lake, where he says that he's active in the St. Mary's Catholic Church. Now, I won't hold that against him because I happen to know his wife is United Methodist. And she also is on the faculty and staff at Buena Vista, teaching composition. Oh, composition and running? No, okay. Teaching composition and running an endowed academic lecture series. The Offenburgers' stepdaughter, Janae, is in sales in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Andrew is in Nashville, Tennessee, working on the staff of U.S. Senate candidate Lamar Alexander. Please welcome Chuck Offenburger.
Well, thank you all. I'm intimidated to be up here trying to follow Tom Louden. That was a wonderful, I felt like I got a real history lesson as you did that, Tom. It was fascinating to hear that. It was the story of how all great Midwestern towns got built, is what it really was, and Fairfield did it in many ways a whole lot better than a lot of other towns. It's really an honor for me to be invited to come here tonight on your 75th anniversary of the Chamber. I think it's not only a time to look at what you've done in 75 years here, but it's a time to anticipate what you could do in the future. Because I do think, as I'm going to say later on in more detail in my speech, that you have positioned yourself to be the very model of the small Iowa community for years and years to come. You've done a wonderful job here. It also occurred to me as Jim was reading those businesses that used to be here way back in 1927, and we were chortling about some of them that had such odd-sounding products today that at some soon-to-be chamber meeting, you ought to all sit around and make notes on what businesses of today in 2002 that you think people will be laughing about 75 more years from now, because I'm sure they will be. When I'm out speaking this time of year, I always feel like I should lead off by saying, I'm Chuck Offenburger and I'm not running for anything. And the reason you can tell I'm not is because I come in here wearing an earring and black and white saddle shoes. And you don't see many of those on candidates, I don't think, at least down here in southeast Iowa. I should explain, they've become somewhat trademarks of mine. You know, I'm 55 now, and I've had this earring for 10 years. And when you have lived as publicly as I have in Iowa all these years, and you decide when you're a 45-year-old guy that you're going to get an earring, you better, by God, be willing to explain it. And here's the explanation. Like a lot of other things good things that have happened in my life, I've got this earring as a result of RAGBRAI. 11 years ago, Jim Green, who's now the RAGBRAI boss, was in the circulation department at the Register, and he always rode right beside me on RAGBRAI. So the two of us are going down the road 11 years ago, and we notice all these cool young guys showing up wearing these earrings. And we're kidding about it. Well, Greenie was turning 50 years old the week after that RAGBRAI, and I thought, God, what a great gag gift. I'll get a gift certificate drawn up. Good for the two of us to have our ears pierced on his 50th birthday by our nurse friend Barb Allen at her house. And a great gag gift. So I drew up this gift certificate, and Barb and I signed it, and I gave it to Greenie for his 50th birthday. We had a big laugh and didn't do a thing about it. Well, the next year came, and we're back out on our bikes out there, and even more cool young guys are showing up with these earrings on. So we start kidding it about it again, and kidding became a dare, and I said, all right, by God, this is it. Tuesday night after RAGBRAI, Barb Allen's house, 7 o'clock. We're going to get it done. He said, okay. So that Tuesday night came, I showed up at Barb's house, and Greenie didn't. I went ahead and had it done. I've been wearing this earring ever since, just to spite him. Now, for you fellas who are thinking about getting one of these, this has probably never occurred to you. There's something about having being a guy wearing an earring when you're 55, that there's something good about that might, well, it never occurred to me until after I started wearing one. That is this. When I get up in the morning and I'm shaving, I mean, I go a long time, never notice that, but I get up in the morning, I'm shaving, and I'll spot it in the mirror, and it is just so stupid. It's impossible for me to take myself too seriously the whole rest of the day, which I have found is a real good way for me to live. Now, my Bass black and white saddle shoes. I walked into journalism, the Troy Banner staff at Fairfield High this afternoon. Kid said, "What's the deal with the shoes?" I said, "God, they're sweeping Iowa. Haven't you heard them about it down here?" I said, "Get on my internet site there. See that shoe right up beside my name? Click on it. And when you do, it says, 'What's the deal with the saddle shoes?' It tells you the story, which is this. I've been wearing these black and white saddle shoes, made by Bass Shoe Company, since I was in 6th grade in Shenandoah. Always pretty sure they were going to come back into style at any minute. And they have frittered up close a couple times over the years. Once when I was going to Vanderbilt in Tennessee, cheerleaders started wearing them. And a couple other times they've gotten close, but never really made it. Well, anyway, I wore them anyway. So, 8 years ago, 1994, I'm wearing a pair that is so rickety that in August, my right big toe poked a hole through the upper part of the shoe. I love those shoes. So I jump my car, I'm going to Decorators on a story, and I go up through Conrad, Iowa, black dirt capital of the world. Little shoe shop there called the Country Cobbler, Linda Hart, proprietor. I walked in there, I said, "Linda, here's my saddle shoes. Put a little patch right on that hole if you would. I got to go to Decorators. I'll be back through this afternoon to pick them up." She looked at me and she said, "I'm not fixing those one more time." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I've resold them twice. They're shot. Get new ones." All right. So I go to Decorators, come back. Next day or two, I'm thinking about that. And so I go over to Yonkers, no shoes. Go out to Brandeis, which was then out at Valley West Mall, no shoes. So I'm heading to Mason City on the story a day or two later, and I go by that outlet mall at Story City. You've seen it up there, and there's a Bass sign on it. I thought, here we go. So I go in there, and there's a guy standing there. I said, "I want a pair of men's black and white saddle shoes." And he said, "Well, we don't carry them." I said, "You know what? I might have got these out of a catalog. You got a catalog?" He said, "Sure." So I open up the catalog, and I'm spinning through it. None. But there's an 800 number, customer hotline, Bass Shoe Company, South Portland, Maine. So a day or so later, I think about it again. I call that 800 number, and I get a woman named Shirley Wood on the phone. And I said, "I'd like to order a pair of men's black and white saddle shoes, size 10.5. And she said, "Well, we don't make them." I said, "You don't make them?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, there's no demand." And I said, "But there is in Iowa." And she said, "You know what? We haven't noticed." I said, "Well," I told her this story. I've been wearing these forever. And I said, "Look, I know this is going to cost me an arm and a leg, but would you just special make me a pair? And I know I'll have to pay extra for them, but would you please do it?" And she said, "Mr. Offenburger, this is Bass Shoe Company, largest retail shoe company in the world. We don't special make one pair of shoes for anybody." And I said, "Well, what if I could get my friends out here to order a pair? Would you then?" And she said, "You don't have enough friends for us to do that." I got off the phone. I was steamed. And I sat down. I started off the next day's column, and I said, "There are 6 known adult males in Iowa wearing Bass black and white saddle shoes," and I named them. I knew them all. I said, "I've checked with them, and we're all in the same boat. Our shoes are worn out, and Bass Shoes isn't making them anymore. So we know the rest of you have been watching us wear these, thinking how cool we look with them on. So why don't you write funny letters to Bass Shoe Company, send them to me at the Register, but on the line of why they should start making black and white saddle shoes again." So I write that column, I fax it off to South Portland, Maine, the Bass Shoe Company, no answer. 40 letters come in, some funny ones. I wrote up a second column, why Bass shoes should be made again, saddle shoes, sent it off to South Portland, Maine, no answer. About 70 letters come in, including one from a school teacher in Atlantic who says, "Dear Chuck," this is 1994 in the fall, "Dear Chuck, Got an idea for you. Clint Eastwood is over in Winterset this fall making that new movie, Bridges in Madison County. If you could get Clint Eastwood to put on a pair of those shoes for you for just one scene in that movie, everybody in America would want it. So I wrote that in the next column, and I led it off by saying, well, Clint and I haven't been talking much lately. Told the story, faxed it off South Portland, Maine. 3 days later, registered letter arrives for me at the newspaper from Mitchell Massey, Senior Vice President, Retail, G.H. Bass Shoe Company. I signed for that letter and I opened it up. It says, Dear Mr. Offenburger, you do not need to try to get Clint Eastwood to put on a pair of those shoes for you. We surrender. He says, one time only, for you and all those friends of yours out there, you get their shoe sizes, you get their checks made out to Bass Shoes, $65 for women, $65 for men, $62.50 for women. You send them in here one time only. We're going to make the shoes, Mr. Offenburger. You better order 2 pair yourself. So I jump in the paper and declare this the greatest victory in the history of victories. And then reminded everybody that it's time to put their money where my mouth has been. Not having a clue what's going to happen. We hold this order open for 2.5, 3 weeks. And it was just about Halloween time. We sent the order off to Bass Shoes for 676 pairs of Bass black and white saddle shoes and checks totaling $48,000. Suddenly it's a different deal. Don Nielsen, the president of Bass Shoes, gets excited about this, and he says, not only are we going to make these, we're going to make them and deliver them by Christmas Day so all those Iowa people can wear them to church. He says, turn that factory upside down, we're going to start making these shoes. So they do. They start cranking off these shoes, and the first 10 pair goes on the feet of their sales force going to the New York City Shoe Show. Biggest shoe show in the world. And they go in there telling the story of the Iowa buy. And they get orders for 10,000 pairs of saddle shoes. And I reach the zenith of my journalism career because I am on page 1 of the New York Times fashion section. Now, you wear shoes like this, like all your high school kids in Fairfield are going to be wearing here soon, I know. You wear shoes like this and you notice something about them that might not occur to you at first, and it's this. When I walk into a crowded room like this wearing these pairs of shoes, people don't notice my earring near as quick. Well, it's great to be back in Fairfield. Hometown of one of Iowa's most amazing mixes today of long-established manufacturers and industrialists and new day entrepreneurs. An amazing mix. It's the town that launched the Iowa State Fair and gourmet ice cream. The hometown of military generals, right? The Lawson brothers. And that lovable 34th Army Band, which I think was my first exposure to Fairfield, as a matter of fact. I was a young National Guardsman up fighting the Battle of Camp Ripley when I ran into the 34th Army Band, and the first time I saw their payday parade, I thought to myself, my God, those must be interesting people down there in Fairfield. You'll have to ask some members about that. Fairfield, the home of grain farmers and jewel merchants, the hometown of a lot of old RAGBRAI friends of mine, as a matter of fact, the late Walt and Ann Gary, Kim and Brian Woods, who I understand have moved out now, Terry Lowenberg, Roy Eubanks, the old trooper, and many, many others. The hometown of Martha Flinspaw, which takes me back to a favorite old column. If I can quickly take you back to May of 1985 in the pages of the Des Moines Register, and it's already been established that I'm a Catholic guy, okay? So I led this column off talking about how confession has fallen on hard times and no one shows up in the little boxes anymore. But I said I needed to, and I led it off this way. I said, oh God, forgive me for what I've been saying about the Methodists. For several years now, as I've spoken to groups around Iowa, I've been getting cheap laughs at the expense of Methodists. I lead into it saying that to do my job effectively, I have to experience things in different sorts of places with different sorts of people and then learn whatever I can from being there. Then I tell how I once spent a whole night at Peck's Tap in Libertyville and another whole night singing hymns with the Methodist men's group in Villisca, and that I learned different things in those two places. At Peck's Tap, I say, I learned the true meaning of life. But the problem was the next morning I couldn't remember what it was. At the hymn sing, I learned that while Methodists can't sing on key, at least they're loud and they do sing all the verses. My audiences have loved this stuff, at least until a day last fall when I trotted it out again while addressing the faculty of the Fairfield Community Schools in a meeting before classes started. Quote, "I'm Martha Flinspaw, junior high vocal music instructor," said a challenger to that line, "and I take exception to what you said. I'm also director of the chancel choir at the First United Methodist Church here, and we are going to prove you wrong." So she kept after me for several months and brought me down in May for 90-minute service of a little liturgy and a lot of music. And I concluded that it was very spiritually touching, and at the end I had to say, uncle, that in fact Martha's Methodist could sing right on key. I do note that the highlight of the night was the Fairfield Dixieland Band, a 7-member band, and they played with gusto. At one point, their rhythm was so overwhelming that trombonist Ron Prill and banjo picker Merle Bates were plainly dancing in the altar area. My goodness, I thought, I can remember my mother telling me how she thought Methodists weren't allowed to dance anywhere. And here they were doing it right up in front of Pastor Claire Odell and everyone else in the magnificent old church. But later Odell said that all that was okay. Well, what he really was talking about was how it's okay to let music really move you. After all, he said, invoking some pretty powerful authority, our own John Wesley once wrote, "Why should the devil have all the good music?" So then I concluded, oh God, it's me again, the Catholic guy. I penitently spent Sunday night in Fairfield with the Methodists. One thing bothers me. How come when you were dividing things up, you gave John Wesley to them and gave Latin to us? We still haven't gotten over it. Fairfield, the hometown of the legendary Lee Gobble. It made my evening. It made my week to see Lee walk in here tonight with his collar button undone. And if you don't know what that's about, ask one of your wives, because every woman in Fairfield knows what that's about. You do, don't you? I met Gobble for the first time. I was at a reception at the country club in Fairfield, oldest country club west of Mississippi, right? Am I recalling that right? I'm at a reception, and I really didn't know many people there that night. And I am there, and up walks this guy to me, and he says, "You Chuck Offenburger?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "There's going to be a phone call for you." And I said, "What?" The next thing I know, he's standing there, and I hear this ring, 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 ring. And he says, and he pulled a phone out. I mean, like a top of a phone. He says, "Yeah, just a minute. It's for you. It's Donald Call." He hands it to him. It was not Donald Call, of course. There's 1,000 great Gobble stories, but I think my favorite is he goes down. You know, he's an antiquer of the first rank, and he's down to an estate sale in Stockport. This is a great story if you've never heard it. He's down there in Stockport, and they're selling all this stuff, and everybody sees Lee there, and he's such a favorite in the area that they're going to stick him. And so they have a bag of rags, and they're carrying it around, and they're bidding on it, and the next thing he hears is sold to Lee Gobble for 50 cents, or whatever it was, under $1. So he goes over and, being a good guy, pays whatever it is and takes the bag. As he's leaving, he throws it in the trunk of his car and doesn't do anything about it, goes home. Eventually takes it out of the trunk, throws it in the garage, and doesn't do anything about it, and it sits in the garage for months. So eventually he gets the spring cleaning or whatever, and he goes and he sees this bag of rags, and he's like, oh God, I still haven't done anything with this. And he starts going through, and he pulls out a wool Chicago Cubs baseball uniform. Wool. And he looks at it, and down on the shirt tail of it is embroidered Frank W. Chance. Tinkers to ever to Chance. I believe we're going back to like 1908 Cubs or something like this. Gobble goes down to Stockport and says, you know, when I bought that bag of rags, was there any family down here by any chance way back when named Chance? Come to find out, there indeed was a family there named Chance, and they had a young man on the town baseball team, and the town baseball team didn't have any uniforms, and their famous uncle, Frank Chance of the Chicago Cubs, sent a bunch of old Chicago uniforms down there. Lee Gobble, who was getting stuck for 50 cents, winds up with a wool uniform that's been appraised, people have tried to buy it for him for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So Gobble triumphs again. I have to say this next one, Fairfield, the hometown of Clark Smith. Do you remember Clark Smith? Clark with his wife Lauren are the owners and operators of the Butler House on Grand Bed and Breakfast in Des Moines, one of the finest bed and breakfasts in Iowa, and one of the partners and patrons on everybody's favorite internet site, www.chuckoffenburger.com. So check it out and go see the Smiths up there. The hometown of Dr. John Kelly, who in his last year as president of the board of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, hired me to do my most recent book, which I've just finished. It comes out in December, The History of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, framed around the biography of E. Wayne Cooley, who just retired October 1st after 48 years of building the finest girls' high school sports program in America. It was great doing that book. I had spent 8 months doing it, interviewed over 150 people all over Iowa, got connected with former athletes, former coaches, went way back in the history and told the story of how it all developed. But there's a problem doing that if you're a fan like I am. You have all these high school girls who've been great stars and whom most of us in Iowa would remember their names. You have them frozen in your mind as nimble, quick, 17-year-olds averaging 68 points a game. And then you encounter Denise Long Rieff, maybe the greatest there ever was, and she is 51, by God, years old. But there's a great story about Denise. She's a pharmacist in Wichita area, works for Walgreens stores, and so she wears out a car doing all this commuting, so she needs a new car, so she drives into a car lot in Wichita, and there's a nice selection of cars, and there's a basketball hoop on the driveway. So she goes in and starts dealing on this car, picks one out, and sits down with the sales guy, and they're finalizing the deal. And she says, I noticed your basketball hoop out there. And he says, yeah? He says, if we're not busy, we shoot a little. And he says, did you ever play any? And she said, well, I play a little basketball. He said, all right, I'll tell you what. He says, let's go out there and each shoot 10 free throws. If I beat you, or if you beat me, you get $500 off this car. If I beat you, you don't get the discount. She says, okay. Well, she hadn't been playing any. She plays a little tennis, but she hadn't played any basketball for years. But with money on the line. Denise Long, who led the Union Whitten Cobras to a 113-107 victory in the '68 title game, the greatest game ever played in Iowa, probably. Denise is on the line, bounces the ball, and starts shooting. 7 out of 10. She said, I thought that was pretty good for as little as I've played lately. And then the guy started shooting, and he hit 6 out of 10, she said, which I thought was pretty darn good for a car salesman, but I got the $500 discount. A lot of great stories coming in that book. Fairfield, the hometown of my old friend, I saw him here tonight, Bob Rasmussen. who I believe succeeded William Coop as mayor of Fairfield. And he really became one of my favorite mayors in all of Iowa. In Bob's, I think you all know this, but in Bob's long tenure at City Hall, but even more so in his long career with the Iowa League of Cities, which had him traveling all over the state, he became a great salesman and sometimes an interpreter for Fairfield to the rest of the state. He really did. And now today, Fairfield is still the home of one of my favorite mayors in the state, my friend Ed Malloy, who in that same Rasmussen tradition continues to be an excellent salesman and sometimes an interpreter for Fairfield to the rest of the state. He really does. It's a great place. It was fun for me, even as an outsider, to come into town today and pick up this tabloid and spin through, and I thought it just really told the story of this town as you read through this tabloid. Some great stories there about the old challenges and the old battles that have been faced and fought and won. And it's neat now to be able to look around and see how far you've come. But then I have always been partial to Chamber of Commerce work because I found that chamber directors and chamber presidents are excellent news sources most of the time, and I've worked with a whole lot of them around the state. And right now, my brother, Dan Offenburger, happens to be one in our hometown of Shenandoah. He's both the chamber and economic development director, much like Bob is here for your organizations. He's been much on my mind. He just had surgery today to have his thyroid removed. He had a little cancer trouble, and it seems to have come out of that pretty well. I talked to him today as I was driving through Ottumwa. He called me and reported in. But I thought I would, one thing I told Dan when he was getting that job in Shenandoah, I think tells the story about a lot of chamber executives particularly. He was the athletic director at Creighton University in Omaha. He'd been in sports administration most of his career. And then he met the fate of all big-time college athletic directors. He got fired. And so he went into business in Omaha and was doing some consulting on marketing and promotion, but not doing a lot of anything. And I'm still taking the old hometown paper, and I pick it up, and I see Shenandoah has fired its chamber director at the time, or economic development director at the time, a man named Dave Hackey, who I also knew from being around the state. And that evening, I happened to talk to my brother Dan, who was in Omaha then, and I said, Dan, you know what? They just, Dave Hackey's leaving in Shenandoah as the economic development director. And you know what? Maybe you ought to go down there and apply for that job. And Dan said to me, what? He said, I don't know anything about economic development or chamber work. And I said, well, you know what? I don't really either, but I've known some of the best in the business all over this state. And my observation is that about 90% of this job is bullshit and enthusiasm. And you got it. And I try to have it myself. But Dan says his 10 years now in Shenandoah have really been successful. They've added 1,900 jobs in Shenandoah in 10 years' time. They're about maxed out on their labor force, and now they're refocused and trying to revitalize the retail district, and they're having some good experiences with that. Dan says big projects in small towns work with 5 components. Good ideas, at least a possibility for financial backing, maybe most important, good volunteers when you need them. 4th, a can-do attitude. 5th, some luck. And he says you put all those together and you build what he says is Shenandoah's goal is to have the lifestyle America needs and wants. And I think that's the goal of many towns the size of Shenandoah and your Fairfield and my Storm Lake. I view Fairfield now, 75 years into the Chamber's history, I view Fairfield as a town that would almost be a sister city to what I'm experiencing in my new hometown of Storm Lake. Think about this. Our communities are very similar in a number of ways. We're both just over 10,000 people. We're over 10,000 for the first time in the community's history. We're both very diverse. We're both full of young people. We've both got long records of being industrial centers and retail trade centers for our areas. We're both college towns. We're both growing, and thus are the envy of a whole lot of county seat towns our size that are in decline. And both of our communities have another thing in common. We both get kicked around in the media from time to time, and I know now how infuriating that is. And yet, we know the truth too, and it's this. Fairfield, your Fairfield and my Storm Lake are, from my money of traveling around the state for a lot of years looking at a lot of towns, are two of the most interesting small towns in the whole state of Iowa. They really are. The heart of my message to you tonight is this, on your 75th anniversary of your chamber. There's an old Iowa out there, and there's a new Iowa out there, and I like them both. Your Fairfield and my Storm Lake are very much in the new Iowa. We know how to do change when a lot of other communities do not. And we're the better for it in this increasingly global economy in which we find ourselves all living today. There's a lot of old Iowa out there, and there's the new Iowa. And I'll tell you, it's far better to be where Fairfield and Storm Lake are than where a lot of other small towns are today. You've been able to see that Fairfield was different, at least in my view, as someone that's spent a lot of time in your community through the last 25 years. You could really start to see that Fairfield was different from a lot of other towns in the middle 1980s because the rest of Iowa was getting killed in the farm crisis, and Fairfield just seemed to be moving steadily ahead. You were the envy of the state. You've been able to see that Storm Lake was different in the 1990s, when our community opened itself up to immigration to provide the labor force that our industries were begging for. And now we see the benefits in our town of having 37 different nationalities living together in a small town and making it work. And we see an ever-increasing transition by our newest residents out of the meat plants, which is our major industries, out of those meat plants and into their own small startup businesses, and the great American dream has started and restarted again in Storm Lake. Meanwhile, change keeps sweeping Iowa in bigger and bigger waves, and I have more confidence that Fairfield and Storm Lake are going to handle it a lot easier than a lot of other places. Because, as I said, we know how to do change in our two towns. We've lived it, and a lot of places haven't. Ed Malloy and I got to know each other as members, appointed members by Governor Vilsack to the Strategic Planning Council, and you all know that story. One of the things we did when we got together was we had the experts come in to us and give us the trend lines and the statistics about where Iowa was. Our charge from the governor was to come up with a vision for what Iowa should be like by the year 2010 and an action plan on how to get there. He wanted more Iowans, younger Iowans, better paid Iowans, and he wanted to change the face of the state. You've seen our recommendations. I know you've been very active on this in the community. We think we came up with that plan that would do this, and now we know how important it is. Among those statistics we saw, we have 137,000 fewer people under the age of 19 in Iowa than we did 20 years ago. Scary. If we don't increase our labor force by 310,000 people in the next 10 years, we're going to see industries moving because we won't be able to supply their labor need. If we don't grow our population by about that same figure, we're going to lose one of our representatives in the United States Congress in the 2010 census. We would drop from 5 to 4. All those things are scary. And that's why we need to take the example of what's been done in Fairfield, and for that matter, what's been done in Storm Lake, to the rest of the state to help rebuild and repopulate this whole state. Those are scary figures, and there's a lot of other ones I could go into with you here tonight. But I heard those, and I still come away and march on now as optimistic about the future of Iowa as I've been at any time in my life. And here's why. Two reasons really. One, for all of our problems that we have with our declining population statewide and all the other challenges, this state continues to be one of the most livable places on earth. By comparison with most of the rest of the world, we indeed seem more livable today, maybe, than we seemed 10 or 20 or maybe even 50 years ago. The rest of the world has become a much more dangerous place, and it makes us look that much more livable, maybe unfortunately. But the second reason, I'm confident about the future because I've seen your town and my town already living it, and it is good. I want to congratulate you on your 75 years together, working hard for Fairfield, and I challenge you to be that model community for the rest of us in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chuck, for your kind comments. We really appreciate you being here tonight and helping us make this a special occasion. Well, I'm not quite done with the history. I got a little bit more from 19... I can see why my wife is thinking I'm crazy. What did people do for entertainment in Fairfield in 1927? Well, athletics were big. Basketball at the Armory. Everyone knows where the old Armory is there next to the Fairfield Ledger. And you know, this week I was up at the Ledger talking to Jeff about the tabloid for the paper, and I noticed that the side door of the Armory was open. So I thought, well, I didn't ask permission. I thought Chet would be in there. I hope you don't mind, Chet. I walked in there and looked around, and boy, it's just like you were 75 years ago. You know, the gym floor's there, the baskets are there, just some of those old junk cars in there. Awesome. Sorry about that. Anyway, that was the Armory. Basketball at the Armory. Ottumwa versus Fairfield, 50 cents. And you could get reserve seat tickets at Gomer's Drugstore, which was on the square, I think, on one of the corners. Next to the post office is what it said, wherever the post office was then. Well, there were two theaters in Fairfield in 1927, the Orpheum and the Victory Theater. And some of the movies that were showing that year, at the Orpheum, The Perfect Sap. I don't know why that caught my eye. Another one was Norma Talmadge in Camille. Hadn't heard of Norma Talmadge. At the Victory, you could see The Fighting Buckaroo. And here's one that I have seen, an old silent movie, The General, with Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin in the circus. Now, a big event in February of 1927, the American Legion put on a musical comedy, and I don't know if it had any political satire there, but it was called Don't Park Here. And that was on February the 18th and the 19th. And they had a special edition of the lead. That's where I got a lot of these ads. They printed a special edition for the American Legion musical comedy. It was a big deal. Oh, and another movie at the Victory was John Barrymore in Don Juan. This was apparently a hot movie because it was only there for 3 days. They had shows at 2, 7, and 9, and you could. They had two different kinds of seats. I don't know whether the balcony seats were more expensive or the ones on the main floor, but it was 20 cents or 40 cents. The Daily Ledger, you could buy it for $5 a year by carrier or $4 a year by mail. And of course, Parsons athletics were big. In the fall of 1927, they reported that the Parsons Wildcats were about to open the Iowa Conference season in Pella against Central, and they were favored to win. The previous year, in 1926, Parsons had won the conference championship, and they were favored to beat Central that fall of 27. They didn't do so well against Simpson, though. It must have been a good game. They lost 13-12 when they played Simpson that fall. So that's some of the things for fun in Fairfield in 1927, and that brings us to the end of what I hope has been a fun evening for everybody. It has been for me. Need to make a few thank yous. It maybe sounds like this is a president's show. Well, there's a lot more to the Chamber of Commerce than whoever happens to be the president in that given year. There's, first of all, the staff in the office Bob tries to stay in the background, but he does an awful lot when he's in the background, earns that big paycheck. But Bob Phipps and Sally and Nancy, I want to recognize them and thank them and all the other chamber workers that have really made this a full-time job for 75 years and been a big part of the success. Thank you to those people. And also thank you, you see their names printed in the bulletin. I guess I'm showing my Methodism, but in the program. The other members of our board of directors, they're every bit, if not more so, important than who happens to be president. And I want to thank my board members and everyone else that's ever served on a board or a committee with the Chamber of Commerce. The volunteers are really a big part of the success. Thank you to board members. And I want to give a special thank you to our 75th anniversary committee. They worked for, I think, over a year probably getting ready for this. In fact, it was such a hard job that we lost about half the committee before we got to the banquet. But Bev Nelson started out as the chairman of that committee and got things rolling, and the planning started in good shape. Pat Doyle served on that committee, and oh, that just occurs to me, I forgot something. Jody Kerr was on the 75th anniversary committee. Deb Davis, Jay Mitchell, he worked so hard on it that he moved to California to get off of the committee. And Jerry Green also left town. But we do thank all these people for their efforts. And the thing that I forgot to do was to recognize the past presidents that are here. And I'd ask you to stand and be recognized where you are there. Of course, I mentioned Bev Nelson. Tom Thompson. That's here. And Tom Louden, we've appreciated his remarks. Dr. Gary Roth. Howard Johnson. I think Howard looked great in the rumble seat of that car in the Kids' Day Parade. Tom Holmquist. Judith Cox. Craig Foss. Pat Doyle. And I asked his dad, Neil Doyle, to stand up too. I think they're the only father-son combo in our history. Cherry Brewer. Jerry Long. Tom, your dad too? Yeah. Your dad was the chamber president too. Roy Louden. Very good, thank you. Tim Kiken. And by the way, Tim says that he was really pleased with that picture. Jody Kerr last year. Royce Huff. when I talked to Royce about his year, he claimed credit for a lot of things, which I pointed out to him happened some other year. Dick Smith. Lefty Pesh and Lefty. And I should point out, Lefty's proudly wearing his ambassador's red jacket there, which he served faithfully forever as an ambassador, and we thank you for that. And Jeff Wilson.
Stu Gomer.
Did I miss Sarah? Oh, I'm sorry. Who did I miss? Stu Gomer.
Yeah.
Sarah Cochran. Oh, sure. Yeah, I even talked about her. She was she was in the newspaper, so I didn't think I needed to give her any more recognition. Anyone else? Oh, I didn't say Chuck? Oh, that's right, because you were a late addition to my list, weren't you? Sorry about that, Chuck. Martha Rasmussen? Okay. I take back what I said about the chamber staff. They didn't give me a very good list there. Oh, Chet Danielson, too. Last call. Hey, just while I have everybody else stand up. Okay, we're getting about down to the end here. I do want to thank the committee that handled the decorations, Marty Phipps and Sig Moore and Diane Bauman. They did a wonderful job. Oh yeah. How could I forget my brain on the head table out there? This is courtesy of Martha Stewart, I guess. Using vegetables in water is supposed to be a good decorating idea, I guess. I don't know. You suppose there's any way we could preserve that? I suppose when I was in college, we kept a German chocolate cake on the top shelf for a real long time. Okay, thank you also. I'm running out of things here. Thanks to Jeff Wilson and Gene Ludke for the great job on the special edition in the Ledger. And if you don't have yours or want another one, there's a big stack of them by the door here. Be sure and get one on your way out. And thank you to the advertisers that put some very fine comments to support that tabloid. That makes us at the Chamber feel good to see those good comments in the advertising. Anything else I've forgotten, Bob?
Did you say Howard Johnson?
Yep, I got Howard. I was thinking. And Chet. Yep, got everybody. Okay, now, and so past presidents, now that we know you're all here, please do come up and get your framed artwork here. That's our gift to you to thank you for your year of service, or maybe 2 years or more. And in case you're wondering, Susan did authorize us to print some more copies of those. So if you would like to come to the Chamber office, the pen and ink sketch will be available for $20, unframed. And if you would like her to colorize it, that doesn't sound quite right, but watercolor it, accent it, I don't know what the right art term is, she would be glad to do that also for an additional $20. So if you'd like one in color, it'd be $40, and that'd be a nice keepsake. Anything else before we close? Well, thank you all for coming tonight and making this a special night. This is a big honor for me to be able to stand here and take on this special occasion. I mean, I'm just one in a long line of presidents, and I'm just the one that's lucky to be here on this occasion. And we'll see you in 25 years for 100. So have a good night.